First, Mr. Peters, thank you for doing this with us. We do appreciate the time. And we'll try to get you out of here within 20, 25 minutes or so.
Be great.
But for our viewers who don't maybe not know you yourself and your background, your history, and why you're deciding to run on it, I want to give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself and tell our viewers a little bit about why you're running for U.S. Senate.
Well, first off, I'm a husband and father. I'm married to Colleen for a couple decades, and we have 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. My professional background, I spent 20 plus years in the investment business, helping families plan for retirement and their children's education. I also served in the U.S. Navy Reserve, was a lieutenant commander and a CB Combat Warfare Specialist designation while I was in the Navy Reserve. I served in the City Council, a state senator, and now in my 3rd term in the United States Congress. And the reason I'm running for Senate is really pretty straightforward. I believe that we need to have common sense problem solvers in the U.S. Congress, bringing my background in business for over 2 decades, plus my military background, and I'm just about rolling up your sleeves, solving problems. I'm very frustrated with what I see in Washington, where people aren't willing to come together and work together. Although I've been reaching across the aisle and have worked with Republicans in order to get things done, I think we need to have more folks in the Senate that are willing to do that, and that's why I've decided to run for the U.S. Senate.
You have communities like Flint, like Detroit, that have fallen on hard times over the last several decades and all that. The city of Flint's under state receivership and all that, and there are a lot of challenges that face these communities and all that. What can you as a U.S. Senator, or what can the federal government do to help prop up communities like Flint, like Detroit, and make them really world-class cities?
Well, I've represented communities very similar to Flint over the years. I've represented the city of Pontiac for many years, and currently I represent half the city of Detroit. So I understand that we have to have an aggressive urban agenda in order to help our central cities. You can't have a great state if you don't have strong cities. You need a strong city of Flint. You need a strong Saginaw, Bay City. These are communities that are absolutely critical for the future of our state. And there are a number of things that I do and will continue to do as a U.S. Senator, and one of that is to make sure that we're working closely with the individual communities and their local government to find grants that may be available to leverage the kind of work that they do, whether it's public safety or infrastructure projects. We can work really very closely with local government officials in order to make sure those federal resources are made available. But a big focus for me has always been about business and growing jobs that way. You've got to be able to create jobs in our urban areas. One thing that has been difficult is for small business to get the loans that they need. I spend a great deal of time really on small business lending and making sure small businesses have what they need in order to create jobs. And that's really going to be the job creator in our cities like Flint, Saginaw, and Bay City. It's going to be our small business. So for example, I worked to author the State Small Business Credit Initiative, which is a program to help small companies that might not otherwise qualify for a loan get one. Building public-private partnerships with community banks and credit unions, for example. That program that I authored has already been credited with creating over 6,000 jobs here in the state of Michigan, over 50,000 jobs across the country, and I look forward to expanding that in the United States Senate. We'll be introducing legislation to really evergreen that very successful program, and I'm sure it will be very helpful for us here in the Tri-City area.
Michigan has a very active international border, and obviously the threat of homeland security and terrorist attacks and all that is always a major concern for this area and this region and all that. What changes, or what should be the U.S.'s priority when it comes to trying to balance the two interests? One, which is keeping that active international border, especially when it comes to trade and commerce and all that, but yet making sure that there's enough safety and security where we don't have are letting terrorists through and that sort of thing.
Well, the location of Michigan as a key border crossing is really an incredible advantage for us. And so certainly we have to find balance between homeland security and economic development. But I'd like to first focus on the fact that we have 2 very border crossings, Sarnia, Port Huron, and Windsor, Detroit. And those crossings really put us in a unique position to be a hub, a transit hub for not just the Midwest, but really the whole country. Right now, I'm very involved with the second international bridge that's going to be built between Windsor and Detroit. I've introduced legislation to build the Customs Plaza, which will house not only customs official, but Border Patrol, all of the various government agencies that are part of a border crossing. We need to do the same thing in Port Huron. And actually my legislation says that building those facilities should be based on the actual activity on that border, the crossings. And if you look at that, we're actually number 2 and number 4 in the country. Number 1, Laredo, Texas, already got funding for that kind of plaza. Detroit would be then now move up to number 1, and Port Huron number 3. And we need to actively work, and I will work to fund those facilities, because if you look at where we're located, Michigan, on an international border between 2 major financial power centers, and that would be Chicago and Toronto. Traditionally, through human history, if you're located in that kind of situation, you flourish. We've got to be able to fully capitalize on that so we can continue to grow our economy. But we also have to make sure we have safe borders and secure borders and prevent folks from coming across those borders that may want to do harm, which is why I support comprehensive immigration reform. I supported the immigration reform bill that passed out of the United States Senate. In that bill, there's nearly $40 billion of border protection money that will allow us to have even more safe and secure borders. So that's going to be a critical piece of immigration reform, and I will work to get that passed through the Congress when I get elected to the U.S. Senate.
What's your view of the U.S. policy currently with groups like ISIS? Do we need to be doing more to try to control them and send more troops over there to try to make an impact on their operations, or are there other priorities that you would take with trying to handle terrorist groups like ISIS?
Well, ISIS is a significant threat to us here in the United States, and we have to treat it very seriously. That's why I support the airstrikes that are being conducted against ISIS positions right now to degrade their force. However, I do not support putting American combat troops on the ground. I believe that we need to have the airstrikes, but the folks on the ground need to be people in that region. They need to be from Sunni governments. In the case of Iraq, it needs to be the Iraqi military. That is the force on the ground. I was certainly disappointed and dismayed, like everybody, when ISIS came across the border and basically the Iraqi military laid their arms down and turned the other direction and gave up. We spent a lot of money training the Iraqi forces. We put a lot of money and equipment there. They need to stand up and fight. And although there has been a setback, based on briefings that I've had with the Department of Defense, it's certainly the U.S. military's belief that there are a number of mission-capable units that the Iraqi military has that can defend against further incursions from ISIS, and will have the capability of pushing forward and actually starting to push them out of the country. But that is going to require air support. The United States can provide that resource. But we have to do it in conjunction with other governments, particularly other Sunni governments. We need to have the Saudi Arabians, the Jordanians, folks from Bahrain, United Arab Emirates. They need to fly missions with us, which they're doing. And they also need to provide, they are the ones that need to provide the troops on the ground, would be other Sunni governments. But ultimately, the way you really end ISIS is that you've got to deal with them from the ground up, and that means delegitimizing them. And that means other Sunni religious leaders have to condemn this group, which is not an Islamic group. It's really a fundamentalist group, and it's an extreme group that does not represent the religion. And we're already seeing that with religious leaders from Saudi Arabia and Egypt and other places, which is undermining the support. But when you undermine that support from within, they become weaker. You use Iraqi and other Sunni governments to push on the ground, and then use U.S. Air power along with other Sunni governments to provide the airstrikes.
Another international concern that's making news these days is the threat of Ebola. And while it's happening overseas, and the number of cases here in the U.S. have been fairly small and look to be contained at this point, there's a lot of concern. Is the United States doing enough to monitor what's happening overseas and control people, or at least identify people who are coming on over to the United States, maybe from those areas, and monitoring them and making sure that we're more proactive as far as our approach towards identifying, treating patients who might be from those areas. Do you think the U.S. is taking the right approach on this? There's a call right now out to try to restrict travel to and from West African countries that are being restricted by Ebola. What would your approach be?
Well, the Ebola threat is significant to the United States and to the world. It has to be contained. We need to put and marshal substantial resources to contain it at its source. But I also want to protect the United States while we are doing that. I support travel bans to prevent folks from leaving those countries coming to the United States, particularly while we are setting up the resources in country. Before I left Congress to come back home, we voted on additional resources to put the United States military personnel that'll be going into West Africa. They'll be setting up field clinics and field hospitals and putting in trained professionals, as well as other countries around the world are doing that as well. That takes some time. We'd all like to have it happen overnight, but we know putting together that kind of infrastructure takes a little bit of time. In the meantime, while we're doing that, I think we should have very strict restrictions, and I would support a ban of folks traveling. But ultimately, the only way you deal with Ebola is you got to deal with it at its source. We've got to continue to put significant resources and medical personnel in there to contain this disease. I'm confident we're going to be able to do it, but we've got to be completely focused on it over the next weeks and months.
Focusing back on maybe more domestic issues and all that, what would be your approach towards Michigan, part of the Rust Belt area, trying to increase job creation, business development for Michigan companies, trying to bring more economic activity back here? What can, from a federal government level perspective and all that, can be done to help increase the amount of job creation that's happening here in Michigan?
Well, jobs in the economy is without question the number one issue for us here in Michigan. We still have a very high unemployment rate in this state, and that's even after the auto rescue, which was absolutely critical for our state. I worked very closely to make that a reality, and my original congressional district, Chrysler, was headquartered in that district, and now I have a new congressional district with General Motors. I was intimately involved in making sure that both Chrysler and General Motors got the resources they needed to survive the auto crisis, and thank goodness that happened, and it's been a great success. But we got to build on that success and diversify Michigan's economy. That's why I've been focusing particularly on innovation. In addition to being co-chair of the Auto Caucus, and I'm in a bipartisan caucus with 60 members, half are Republicans, half Democrats. My co-chair is a Republican from California. And I work very closely in a bipartisan way because I believe that's the only way we get things done is you got to reach across the aisle, find middle ground to get things done. We've passed a number of pieces of legislation to be helpful for the industry so that manufacturing can be strong. I'm a believer that you can't have a great country if you don't make things, and manufacturing is critical to that. It's also critical to make sure we have a strong middle class. What I fight for each and every day is middle class families and those who aspire to be in the middle class. Manufacturing needs to be protected. But in order to create even more manufacturing jobs, we have to be innovative. And we have to use the incredible talent that we have here in Michigan innovation. I'm also co-chair of the Innovation Caucus in the House, which looks at how we make those kinds of initial early stage investments. And that's why I've been supportive of incubators here in Flint. I traveled to the incubator here in Flint that starts new companies. We've got a number of those around the state. And make sure that venture capital investing and resources are available for us to use that innovation. You know, the one statistic here in Michigan, I mean, especially in kind of the broad southeast area of Michigan, from Detroit up to Flint and the Tri-County area, we have more engineers than about any other region of the country. That's an incredible resource, and so we've got to make sure that we continue to move and foster that kind of innovation. That's what I work on every day in the House and look forward to doing in the United States Senate.
With education policy, there are, here in the Flint, Bay City, Saginaw, Midland areas, some schools that are doing that rank very high in the state when it comes to state test scores, but there are also school districts that are ranked very low and are struggling on that. How, as federal policy and all that, can you encourage local school districts who are doing well to continue to do what they're doing, to innovate and to really engage students that are seeing success and all that, but at the same time work with the school districts that are struggling to help raise that bar?
So education is a critical investment for us. That's our seed corn, investing in the next generation of leaders, our students and young people. And we've got to be focused on that. And the area that I focus on that I think is so important, particularly when you look at differing performance in districts, depending on the area, and that's early childhood education. The federal government, and in fact I think it's probably the most successful federal government program in history, has been Head Start, which helps children before they even get into kindergarten. And the research is very clear. If a child starts behind that early, it's very difficult for them to catch up throughout their entire career. Head Start is a program that needs to be fully funded. In the sequester, we actually had Republicans that cut Head Start funding and advocated for that. In fact, it would have cut nearly 100,000 students from getting the kind of training that they need to get that Head Start. And although you may save money in the short run, it is an incredible long-term cost to us as a society. In fact, it's been determined for every dollar you invest in Head Start, you get about a $7 return back to the taxpayer. So I am a champion for Head Start and make sure that every district has the resources they need to make sure those children, before they even get to kindergarten, have the kind of nurturing and support necessary to be successful in school. And my finding is that if you start very early, even before kindergarten, you're really far ahead when it comes to the remaining 12 years of primary education.
Most polls being done show a level of dissatisfaction amongst the public towards how Congress or the legislative branch and the executive branch are working together, and many times not working together. What do you think you can do and all as a U.S. Senator and all that to try to reach across the aisle to maybe make things work a little bit better? Not necessarily from a political standpoint and all that, but more for making sure that government works a little bit more effectively for the people that they're supposed to represent.
Yeah, in order for government to work, people have to be willing to find common ground and have to be able to find the middle. And that's really who I am. I've been ranked by groups that rank members based on ideology, for example. I've been ranked as the most moderate member of the Democratic delegation here in Michigan, one of the most moderate members in the country. That makes me a centrist in the middle. Some people say that makes me an endangered species in Congress, being in the middle. However, I think that's where a majority of the people in the state of Michigan are. We're not to the far right and we're not to the far left. We're about folks that want to just try to get things done and find that. You know, my years of business, that's what we did. When you run a business, you try to find that kind of middle ground. You don't always get what you like, but you get things done, which is the most important thing. So that's why I've worked on things like the Auto Caucus, which I'm a co-chair of, with 60 members, half Democrats, half Republicans. I just recently worked with a Republican from Ohio to pass legislation to eliminate some of the burdensome paperwork associated with buying a new car, for example, which is very bureaucratic. Some of that stuff has been around, that paperwork, for decades and made no sense. And I was able to do that, bring people together in both parties, and we actually passed it unanimously. So I believe you can get things done, but you've got to be willing to work across the aisle and do that. And that has been my record in the 5.5 years that I've been in the House. And that's why it's so important in the U.S. Senate to have folks who are willing to do that. And that's why I'm running for the United States Senate, because I want to continue to have that practical, common sense, middle of the road approach that's so desperately needed in Congress.
What does it say that, and we're running out of time here, so this is my last question for you. What does it say about the race that's going on here, the political environment that President Clinton made a visit to Michigan? What does it say about the importance that Michigan is going to play in the upcoming November election? Well,
we were really glad to be with President Clinton here today in Flint, and it just shows the importance of the election. And the message that he had was very clear, is especially with all of this outside money, and I've had millions and millions of dollars of outside billionaires spending money against me, negative attack ads that have been discredited by every fact checker. They don't let facts get in the way of what they put on TV, and they've been hammering me with that. And his message was clear. We can't let out-of-state billionaires determine who the next United States Senator is from Michigan. Only the people of the state of Michigan get that opportunity, and you only get that opportunity if you go to the polls and you vote. That's where your voice is heard. And so it was great to have President Clinton here talking about that, and we certainly hope that everybody here in the greater Flint area, in Bay City and Saginaw, turn out to vote. Their vote really makes a difference. This is an important national election, and it's an opportunity to show that folks here in Michigan care deeply about the future of our country, and we care, and we go out and we vote.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.